To us in terms of London going forward. If we look back at what those RGLs do in terms of price action, if we look at the pound, for example, coming into yesterday's markets, we could obviously have a few ideas based on the RGL process, and we'll take it on a 5-minute chart so that we don't have everything zoomed too much. So this is going back a few days on sterling here. This is the 6p contract. Usually 1 o'clock is an interesting RGL. Why? Because the Asia Pacific session is opening. It's not the most important for the pound, of course, but it's important for things like the dollar. It's important for the yen. So this is not the most important from the Asia Pacific session for sterling. But nonetheless, we want to know where it is. We want to know what the value is doing. We want to know what the sentiment is on these trades here. And there's the session there. The next level that's interesting to us is going to come in at 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock is the London session as it starts. 8 o'clock. So the London session as it starts is there. This is a very, very important session because this is going to be obviously one of the biggest ones. The 8 o'clock session is so much more important because it carries with it all the London volumes. So this session here is massive. And we should obviously be watching what happens around these areas. The next one is possibly at past, but obviously that's all dependent upon any US data coming out. The next one that we would expect to see is the London fix at 1600 hours. There's the London fix price just there. So the London fix is right there. What we normally do with the London fix is we look to see what they are doing to get into that price. And usually if it's selling off, it's going to be a bullish London fix after the London fix. As it transpires, it goes back below that for a big sell-off down here into 1700 hours. The next big one is going to be at a point just here. There it is there, the session close. That's it. The Forex markets are effectively now finished at that point there. And obviously that's us. We're now finished. That's the most recent RGL. That takes us through to the Tokyo session. And we start watching to see directionality between these sessions. If these fixes go higher at the next fix, it's probably a bullish market, right? That's the way the fixes work. That's why we look at these areas. So when we see that they go higher, so the US session goes higher, higher, the restart here takes it higher, 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 the next one is higher, it's probably a bullish pound in the overnight session. And that bullish pound, you can see, comes back into these areas here, comes back into these areas here, comes back into these areas here. You can see what's going on. You can see the value of those levels. As we come into the London session, again, we are higher again. The London session takes us into another high level price. So these are very, very useful little levels to try and recognize going forwards. When we start seeing the price coming back out, we obviously pay very, very close attention. There may well be a value change, but we still know where these big session areas are. These are areas that people will have on those charts as red and green. So when you start going red here, and then you go red here, 2 out of 3 of the last 3 levels are now red. The market's probably going to be selling unless we see a pin rejection buyer, and the market does sell off through those reds. As we come into each of these levels, we start watching any volume twist, of course, in these markets. But generally, as a rule, the next one is going to be the 4 o'clock London fix. The 4 o'clock London fix is right there. 1555 is the 4 o'clock London fix, is that big up candle there. So you're going to be either taking the low of that candle. Remember, the fix isn't a single price, it's an area. So I like how bullish that candle was. So I like the lows. And then, of course, the final candle is always that 8 o'clock candle right there. There's the 8 o'clock candle right there into that little top edge there. And you can see the London fix again coming into play. You can see it brackets itself between those last two, and the price kind of stays in that bracket pretty much the whole session all the way through to the next one, which is the London Open. Look at the London Open here. Look at how amazing the London Open was here. That's crazy, isn't it? Look at how good that London Open candle is. Absolutely nuts. And it gives you a big sell-off almost immediately. It never takes the market red against the fix. Never goes red against the fix. This one's now been swashed, so the red against the fix. We then take the market green above here. Look at the size of the candle when we take out the London Open. The market goes very green when we take out the London Open, doesn't it? Because everything is now green. The last 3 RGLs are now all green. Every algorithm on the planet is now buying the pound. And you can see the pound rips higher massively. And then we start seeing some US selling coming in from half past, and the price sells off. And then the next fix, 4 o'clock, exactly the same as the London Open. The next fix at 4 o'clock, exactly the same as the London Open. Again, it's selling into that fix. And obviously what happens is we go red below it, nice opportunity. We then have the 8 o'clock close. That's our next level right there. And again, it's coming off that level there, so I'd mark that price. And you can see that that gives us an overnight bracket that jams the price. It never goes red. It never goes red above the last one here. Sorry, it never goes green above the last one. We get a toxic sell, and then the pound sells off massively. When does it sell off massively? Take a look. 8 o'clock. It's the exact same price. See that? Exactly the same price. So you start to recognize these areas. You start to say to yourself, wow, okay. So there's a big toxic seller coming in at the London Open, and then obviously that gets retested right here. Sellers come in and absolutely annihilate the price to the downside beautifully. No, I never mark off a wick specifically, John. I just mark off an area. If it happens to correspond to half the candle and it's a wick, then so be it. But I usually just mark off if it's a big candle, I usually mark off half the candle, depending upon if it's a green candle, I'll mark off half the bottom of the candle. If it's a red candle, I'll mark off half the top edge of the candle. It's just an area. It's not any reason or rhyme or reason behind it. It's just to give us an area that's important.